The future of Xbox is extremely exciting, and the Iron Lords podcast had Jason Ronald on their show this week, and he had some really great insights to give us a glimpse into the future as well as help us understand certain things. Since the release of the Xbox Series X and S, there have been tons of questions as to what's coming in the future for the console. Are there more games coming out in 2021? And why do the games run and perform certain ways compared to other consoles like the PlayStation 5? And how is this going to be improved or changed in the future? Now, before we get into this any further, if you guys are new here and you enjoy what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow, help grow this community so we can have some great conversations in the comments below. So Jason Ronald, he was on the Iron Lords podcast this week. Highly recommend going to check out their channel, check out the podcast. It's about a 3-hour long podcast. It was really insightful and really good. So I listened to pretty much the entire thing, and it was extremely interesting from beginning to end. So like I said, highly recommend going to check them out. Some of the questions they asked to Jason Ronald were hard hitting, and they really gave us more information as to what to expect from Xbox, insight on a game that hasn't been announced yet in 2021, as well as the performance with games on the Xbox Series X in terms of not having locked 60 frames per second. So first, if you guys haven't seen the clip yet, it's pretty exciting. Jason Ronald said there is a game that has not been announced yet that is coming out in 2021. So let's listen to the clip and then speculate on what he can mean.
This year, Jason, what's the game that you're hyped for?
Not all games that are releasing this year have been announced.
So I'm just going to stop it there. As you heard him say, not all games that are coming out this year have been announced. And my prediction, because Starfield is supposed to be coming out in 2021, they are going to announce Starfield at E3, and they're going to release it in the holiday season. It's going to be kind of the same thing that they did when they announced Fallout 4. That's what I predict is going to happen, but it could be something completely different, something even more unexpected to that. I would love to hear what you guys think he means when he says that. Now, Starfield is a game that is a space RPG. It is from Bethesda, who make great RPGs, but we haven't seen anything on it. So that's the thing. I'm excited for it. I like space-based games. I like Bethesda games. So no matter what, I'm excited for it, but I would love to see more about this game. And I think E3, if it's coming out in 2021, we're going to see a pretty big gameplay drop on it, and that is something really to be excited for and something to look forward to. And I think that's huge for Xbox. If you think about it, let's say Starfield does come out, it does get good reviews, and it is a game that people enjoy. Xbox in the holiday season is going to have Halo Infinite, which I think is the biggest game of the year, and it's going to have a brand new IP from Bethesda in Starfield. Now, besides that huge info drop, he also talked about one of the big things I think a lot of people are interested in and want to know, and it has to do with games on the Xbox Series X running at the high resolutions, but not having that locked 60 frames per second, as we've seen in a lot of the comparisons. Although the frame rate drops are minor and they are just in certain areas of the game, so it's not something that really hinders the game terribly. They are not locked at 60 frames per second. Sometimes they drop between 50 to 60. Generally, I'd say like 55 to 60. And they go ahead and they ask the question that I think everybody wants to know basically right now amongst the Xbox community, is that the consensus is because Xbox waited for the full RDNA 2, the actual development tools have not yet matured and the developers haven't fully been able to utilize them to the best of their abilities. Is that the reason why we've been seeing some of these performance anomalies, or is there something else that is causing this issue?
So that meant, we waited a little bit longer to get the development kits out than we ideally wanted to, but we felt like it was important enough to wait for some of those features because, once again, this is the hardware platform for the next minimum 7 to 10 years. The industry was not set up to be able to make some of these games from home. And it doesn't matter if you're a small game studio or a large game studio, you're talking about terabytes worth of data, that have to be shuttled around. QA, usually you have large labs and things like that. In a world where you don't have that, sometimes things get missed. I've been spending a lot of time with both our first party studios as well as third party studios, just listening to their feedback, and what can we do to make it easier to work from home?
Yeah.
And all that feedback, like we release updates, usually monthly or every other month to our developer audience just based on their feedback.
Now, there are a couple of things there. He gives a great answer to the question, but there are a couple of things here you really have to keep in mind when we look at these comparisons. The first one being, obviously, we're still very early on in the generation. He said multiple times throughout this podcast, and it's 100% true. You look at games that are released within like the first year or two of a console generation, and then you look at games that are released later on, and it's night and day for some of them on how they look, how they feel, how they play. He mentioned something I think is really great to hear, and that is the fact that they expect this platform, this console, to be the platform for the next 7 to 10 years, and that is why they waited for that full RDNA 2. That is why they waited for features for the Xbox Series X and S, which made the development kits come out a little bit later than they would have liked. And I think overall that's a great thing, because you think what happened in the last generation with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 having to have that mid-cycle refresh and getting more powerful consoles halfway through the life cycle. I'm thinking with the Xbox Series, that may not happen this time, because they waited, because the console has already come out with such great capabilities that we're going to have the Series X and the Series S for 7 to 10 years. And then the obvious one, COVID, and how it's really affected everybody, because they are in an industry where they aren't set up to work from home with the amount of data that they have to transfer back and forth. He mentioned terabytes of data, and the fact that quality assurance teams are going to miss things because they don't have the big quality assurance labs to be able to go over things as good as they would be able to when they weren't working from home. And then the other part, which was really awesome to see, is that they're continuously in talks and providing updates and feedback with the developers. So they're always updating their tools in order to help developers get what they want out of games. I cut some of the answer out. It is a little bit longer just because it went on pretty long. He gave a lot more great information. So like I said, go check it out. Go check out the podcast if you want to see the thing in its entirety. So this thing with the comparisons right now, it's still so early on in the generations. In my last video, I talked about it and I thought, well, maybe this is kind of indicative of what we're going to see going forward through the generation. The Series X pushing the high resolutions with frames between like 50 or 55 and 60, and then the PlayStation 4 with lower resolutions and missing some graphical elements, but having the lock 60 frames per second. And after hearing him talk, I'm pretty confident going forward into this generation, when updates come out, when developers really have full control and understand the tools with the Xbox Series X and S, and as more of the features from RDNA 2 start to get implemented into these games, I'm pretty confident that the Series X is going to have a 4K 60 frames per second without that many issues. I'm excited for it after hearing what he said. I know a lot of people are frustrated with the frame drops with the 55 to 60 or whatever. I mean, it is early on. I think it will improve, and I think going forward this generation, because Xbox waited to get all these features into the console, it's going to be really awesome. The next thing I want to talk about quickly here that I think is pretty cool is, as we know, quick resume is a major feature on the Xbox Series consoles. I absolutely love it. It's completely changed the way that I play games on a console, because I can quickly swap between stuff. Now I have tons of games on the go. I generally usually had like 2, maybe 3. Now I have sometimes 3, 4, and I'm just kind of swapping between stuff, like a 360 game, an Xbox One game, an optimized for a Series X game. I love quick resume, but I definitely will love to see it being added to like some more features where you can actually see the games that are in the quick resume queue. And they asked that great question in this podcast, and here's what Jason Ronald had to say.
And then, as we've talked about, quick resume and kind of the user interface around it is an area that we've gotten feedback since launch.
Right.
People want to understand a little bit better what's happening. They also want a little bit more control, especially for the power users. So that's feedback that we've taken on. The team's looking at various options. One of the challenges is how do you, bridge between what I'll say somebody who is not, say, a power user and somebody that plays all the time.
Good point.
So like we don't want to overcomplicate it, but we've clearly heard the feedback that people want more visibility. They want more control in how quick resume actually works. So we're actively working through various designs, and we'll probably have some stuff to share later this year.
So there you have it. They've seen the feedback for quick resume, and they're going to be sharing more stuff this year. The more he talks in this podcast, the more I'm getting excited for E3. I think E3 is going to be pretty massive for Xbox, with a lot of stuff being shown off. We are still so early on in the infancy of these consoles. The actual software for the Xbox Series X and S is going to continue to get better. So that is something to be excited for. Like I said, quick resume, awesome feature, and I'm excited to see how they're going to improve it. And finally, there's another great question that's asked. One of the big things people continuously talk about is they think that the Xbox Series S is going to hold back this generation because it has that 4 teraflop GPU compared to the 12 teraflop GPU on the Xbox Series X. So a great question was asked about if the CPU is the secret sauce, the main thing that makes sure that the Series S does not hold back this next generation.
I would actually say it's across the board, but like the two main areas are the CPU and the Xbox Velocity architecture.
Right.
Those were critically important because if a developer is going to take a bet on next generation IO performance, we want that exact same performance on the Series S that we have on the Series X. But even with the GPU as well, it was important to us to have all the same features that are in the Series X on the Series S.
So there you have it. That makes a lot of sense. He talks about how the main thing for the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X is the CPU, plus all of the features that they waited for with RDNA 2, and making sure that they got them both in the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S. So going forward through the generation, developers are going to be able to take advantage of those things. And if they want to do it on the X, they'll be able to do it on the S. Yes, the Series S is going to have lower resolutions. Yes, it'll probably have lower frame rates for certain games and stuff like that. But we've seen already the Series S has had great frame rates. It's been able to push 60 frames per second, even some games 120 frames per second. So I don't think the Xbox Series S in any way is going to hold back this next generation. But this was a great podcast. Like I said, it's 3 hours long, so I highly recommend going to check it out. The guys on the Iron Lords podcast did great job asking awesome questions, and Jason Ronald came back with some really insightful answers. I don't know about you, but I love how transparent Xbox has been with going on podcasts, talking to people and giving us information, because people have questions. They want to know what's going on. They want to make sure that their feedback is being heard. And as we go through this generation, the platform is going to continue to thrive. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Specifically, what game do you think he's talking about that has not been announced yet in 2021? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you're new here and you like what you see throughout this video, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to help this channel grow, help grow this community, so we can have some great conversations in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.